guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day today. Today we are talking a little bit about The Wolf Among Us. Now, I have completed the series. I've played through the entire game and I really had a fun time. I decided I was going to do this video afterwards just to kind of talk about my thoughts about the game. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the decisions that I made, as well as some interesting theories that I came across that I just really wanted to put up there because I found it interesting, and so if you're a fan of the game, maybe you'll find interesting as well. So let's get straight into the video. So if you don't know what The Wolf Among Us is, Wolf Among Us is a video game that was made by Telltale Games. They are famous for their decision games where the decisions you make actually impact the gameplay, so they are very popular in that aspect. And the game is actually based off of the comic books. The comic books provide more insight into the characters' backstories and personalities and offer up many theories and speculations about the different characters. That's kind of what makes The Wolf Among Us so intriguing and makes you want to learn more about it. To start off with this video, I am going to talk a little bit about the decisions I made in The Wolf Among Us. So this is my playthrough. If you decide to play the game, you can always choose other options, and I'm sure the gameplay will be a little bit different. That's something I love about this game, is just that the replayability, even though I'm pretty sure the game at its core is the same, there are small little details that will change with every decision that you make. So overall, the decisions I made in the game, I'm pretty happy with. I wouldn't really change any of them necessarily. I like the way I handled all of the different situations, and because your decisions are time-based, it was kind of my honest answers. I didn't have much time to think about it. I didn't have much time to try and be funny. It's just kind of the options I was drawn to most, so it's kind of my honest gameplay, I guess, without really knowing what's going to happen. So overall, the biggest decision that I kind of regret and that I would do differently has to do with Prince Lawrence. I would definitely go to Prince Lawrence's house before I go to Toad's apartment to investigate the dispute. And the main reason for that, I think everybody knows, is that if you go to Toad's apartment first, Prince Lawrence dies. At first I thought he dies either way, but apparently you can change that. You can prevent Prince Lawrence's death if you go there first. When we saw Prince Lawrence in the magic mirror, I'm not gonna lie, the apartment looked like a total wreck, and a part of me did actually think he was already dead, just because there were plates everywhere, there was flies everywhere, and you could kind of see him slumped over in the chair. Even though you couldn't properly see him, it did seem like he had already passed away, and so I thought me going there wouldn't really help because it seemed like Toad was in immediate danger. In that aspect, I wouldn't change my decision because my decision was based off of me thinking that Toad needed help straight away and me not knowing that Prince Lawrence was on a time frame. If I knew that, obviously I would have gone to him first to get him help, but that's kind of the beauty of the game, is that you don't have that information, and so there's a chance that you don't go there first and he passes away like he did in my gameplay. The second decision I think I would change is kind of a bit of a cheeky one. When you go to the Puddin' and Pie and you meet Georgie, he's a character. I'm trying to keep my language PG rated, so I'm not going to describe what I truly feel about the man, but I do not like the man at all. And to get information out of him, you can actually smash objects around. I only smashed one thing. I believe I only smashed the TV because I wanted to try and get information out of him without destroying his property. I think destruction of property is not necessarily the right way to get information out of someone, but now that I kind of know the whole story and how much of a bad guy he truly is and how disgusting he is, I would have definitely smashed that place completely up. I only smashed one thing probably out of 5 or 6 options, and in the end he still said, oh well, Big B smashed up my place. Meanwhile, I broke a TV, come on, it's not that bad. I saved your jukebox, so at least give me credit for that. My thoughts on the game is that it's a very good game with a lot of character growth, and it is able to trigger emotional responses to the decisions that you make. Not many games are able to do that, so kudos to The Wolf Among Us, and I know this happens with most of Telltale's games where they're really good at making this specific type of game, as well as the artwork. It's really good and it really just suits the game. It makes the game so much more unique and enjoyable to play. Some of the character development that I just want to point out and I just want to give shout outs to. The first one would actually be the Woodsman. When you start the series, I hated the Woodsman. Main reason, he was hitting a woman. I don't think that is right. Any type of physical assault I obviously do not agree with, and so watching him yell at her, curse at her, and then physically assault her, I was not happy with that at all. In my mind, the Woodsman was a bad guy, and that was how I thought he would be throughout the whole series. But as the series went on, I got a lot of sympathy for the guy, and at some point I actually wondered, why am I enjoying his character? I think there are certain parts of the series where the Woodsman just became honest, and that said a lot. He opened up about the fact that he actually went to rob Red Riding Hood's grandma and just happened to walk in to the whole scene where the wolf was devouring her and saved her, and he thought he would get a reward from it, so he did it out of greed. And that was a very interesting twist to the Woodsman. Normally in the classic fairy tales, the Woodsman is just a good guy who kind of saved the day, but in the Telltale game, he was just somewhat of a crook, just looking for a quick buck, and he wasn't that much of a great guy. But he supported his friend Holly. I think that was also a big aspect to this. Like, fair enough, he did have somewhat of an affair with Lily, and that came back to bite him in the ass, but he genuinely cared about those characters, and I think that's another plus point for him. His character development went from being such a bad guy to not being the most hated guy in this series. There were definitely other characters that I hated a lot more as the game went on compared to the Woodsman. The second main character that I would kind of point out in this game is actually Vivian. I didn't expect the twists and turns that came with her character. In the beginning, she kind of works through the pudding and pie, and you don't know too much about her. So on one hand, I feel like she's a good person, just another girl who gets treated poorly by Georgie, you know, and I feel sympathy for her because first Faith dies and then Lily dies, and those are some of her closest friends. I mean, she went to Lily's funeral, so they had to be close at some stage, and so you really feel sympathy for her losing her friends, a similar way you feel sympathy for Nerissa. But as time goes on in the game, you actually find out that she isn't as innocent as you first believe. I mean, the whole story about the girls wearing the ribbons and not being able to talk their mind and to tell their truth, that came from her, and she even admits that it was part of her idea to create the ribbons and put it on the girls just because they thought it would be a bit of fun. I don't know how anybody's mind can work like that, to kind of restrict somebody's voice and not be able to stand up for yourself because of confidentiality. I don't see how enforcing that on someone can make you a good person. It feels malicious, and so it goes from a point where I feel sympathy for her, where I view her as a bad guy, but then right at the end of her storyline, she actually chooses to break the curse and sacrifice herself for the other girls, which kind of gives her somewhat of redemption. Not fully, because there was a lot of damage that was done with those ribbons, but it does have some redeeming qualities. So that's just another way where it's shown how the characters can really change and grow and develop in this game. Whether it goes from a good character arc to a villain or the other way around, it's really fluid. That's also what makes a really good game. I never would have figured she would be working with the Crooked Man. When I saw her in the Crooked Man's lair, I was shocked. I never thought she would be involved in something like that, and so it was very interesting. And also, she knew about what actually happened with Faith and Lily's deaths. She knew who caused it, and she kind of tried to protect Georgie, and that also just kind of turns you against her. her whole development in the story is just so fascinating and so interesting. The last couple of characters I would like to somewhat analyze doesn't necessarily have to do with how their character changes in any way, but more so just them in general. So I'm gonna be talking quickly about Beauty and Beast. In the story, they are framed as victims of the Crooked Man. It's very obvious when, you know, you see Beauty sneak out, you're kind of like, oh, what's going on? Is she meeting with someone? And you find out she's working at a motel to get extra money because she's in debt, she's stressed. It's this whole thing, and on one hand you do feel sorry for her, but on the other hand, I really didn't like the way they were in the end. There was some sympathy, but that sympathy really went away when I went to their apartment and there was that whole conversation, because you walk into their apartment and you just see very expensive furniture, paintings, vases, and they are here basically saying they don't have money, they're used to a certain lifestyle, which to an extent I can understand that. When you're used to a certain lifestyle and all of a sudden your financial status kind of changes, it's difficult to just switch, but at the same time it's your responsibility to adjust to a new life, and even if it's not fair, that's the hand you're dealt with and you just got to work with that. You can't just keep overspending and working your way into debt or making deals with crooked men in order to make more money on the side. It just doesn't work that way. It's not that justifiable. And there are people in genuine situations where they cannot control it and they just do not have the money and they get stuck in this, whereas they kind of have wealth, and the way they got trapped in this was just overspending. That's the way I saw it. What really offended me, and this might be a bit of a controversial thing to talk about, was how confrontational they were about the whole situation, especially Beast at some point to make an oath to take down the Crooked Man. At least that's what I did. And I believe it was Beast who said, well, if you do that, can you erase our debt? And for me, it's just like, okay, I'm working on 2 murder cases. 2 innocent women were brutally slaughtered. At that moment, you didn't really realize what was happening, but that's the information that we had. And your main focus is for us to erase your debt. Like, that is not how it works. I have bigger fish to fry. You literally got yourself into this, and it's not my responsibility to dig you out of it. Like, if it was a different situation, maybe I would have considered helping them, but it just felt very entitled. At some stage, they kind of acknowledged what they did and what they were going through, and they acknowledged that they tend to overspend because of their previous life, but they never really took responsibility. And I think that's the part that got to me, is that you can acknowledge your mistakes as much as you want and say, yes, I've made them, but you don't take responsibility for them. You kind of still blame it on other people, and you don't put your energy into actively changing your situation. And that's what it felt like with Beauty and Beast. I know that that's probably not the way they were meant to be framed, but that's kind of the way I looked at them. Also, I don't know how healthy their relationship is. Obviously, they love each other. That's great. Beast is so jealous that he will just attack anyone that he thinks has something going on with Beauty. If any logical situation arose, you should at least give someone a chance to explain. He didn't even give Beauty the opportunity to explain what was going on, and that's a bit rough to me, just to kind of get aggressive. He seems to be like that a lot. He seems very possessive of Beauty, and that's a quality that in real life would be concerning in any relationship. Obviously this is a video game, but that's also something I didn't really like. I think they were the only established couple that you meet in the video game, other than Faith and Prince Lawrence, but to be honest, they were both dead by the time I got to them, basically, so they don't really count. They were the only couple that was really established in the game for what I can recall, and it didn't seem like the healthiest relationship. They made a lot of effort to show that there is love there. It felt very weird, and I understand the bickering and fighting. Financial issues will bring that upon any couple most of the time. It's a really big challenge, but I also just don't like the way, you know, Beast jumps to conclusions and then just attacks people for something he doesn't even know for sure happened. Some of the things I wish was a part of the game, but it's just kind of like ideas that I have after the fact, once the game was finished. One of the ideas that I kind of had was it would be really cool if you had an option to also send the Tweedle brothers to trial. Perhaps that happened and we just didn't get to experience it in the game, because to me that would make more sense. But there is an option to kill Dee at some point, and I chose not to kill Dee. I didn't think it was the right decision to make, but you have the option to kill him, and I wish that if you didn't kill him, then he would have the opportunity to stand trial, because both the Tweedle brothers actually played a huge role in all of the corruption that was happening. They were a part of the glamour scandal, and for all of the Crooked Man's deeds, I think that they could have definitely been charged for some things and been sent away, probably not down the wishing well. It was a special case, I believe, with the Crooked Man, but I feel like there should have been some sort of justice, especially if they shot at Bigby. I mean, you're literally shooting at an officer. That's illegal. Surely that should get you some time behind bars, but you never really got to see whether there was justice. You never got to see if the other characters that was kind of working for the Crooked Man stood trial for their involvement. I mean, surely a lot of them knew that what was happening wasn't fully legal. It would have been interesting to see if the butcher got any legal ramifications, even though he didn't really have much choice for what it sounded like. It was still his butchery that illegal activity was being conducted in, and I think that should count for something. But that was just something interesting I would have thought of, is just if we saw more justice, and I don't think they would have added that into the game. Maybe it happened. It would have been nice for them just to mention like, oh yeah, Dee's trial is tomorrow or something like that, but I definitely don't think they would have added that to the game, because then it would have just dragged on, and the big main guy was the Crooked Man, and you were there for the trial, you were there to see what happens next, so that kind of makes sense to me. The next thing that I thought would be a really cool thing if they added into the game has to do with Aunty Greenleaf. So at some stage you track down Aunty Greenleaf and you find out she's the one making illegal glamours. Snow White freaks out, wants to destroy the tree, which is a little bit drastic, I'm not gonna lie. I think Snow White was on a bit of a power hungry rampage at that moment, but I decided to save the tree because I thought she was being a bit dramatic. What I wish could have happened is if you made a deal with Aunty Greenleaf where she doesn't provide the illegal glamours for the things that she previously sold the glamours for, but instead she would kind of provide them to the population who couldn't necessarily afford to be glamoured all the time at a discounted price, because the glamours she created obviously wasn't perfect. There were some issues with some of the glamours, not everything glamoured correctly, and so it would be a bit ridiculous to sell it full price like the other witches that they mentioned. But one of the biggest things for me that really broke my heart was at the end of the game, Toad got sent to the farm because he couldn't afford glamours. I would have really loved to have seen Aunty Greenleaf creating glamours to help Toad and his son. In a way, I kind of saved her tree. I could have easily confiscated that tree, which I think is what I would have preferred over burning the trees, just taking it away and her not having access to it to prevent her from further illegal activity. But instead, it would have been really nice for her to kind of provide the glamours, but it doesn't seem like that happened because obviously Toad ended up going to the farm, which was really sad. But on the other hand, you have to think about it in a way where you did constantly tell Toad you have to be glamoured. Like, that's just the rules. You can't live in this area if you're not glamoured. And it seems a bit unfair, but they don't want to expose magic to the normal world, for what I can understand, and a talking magical Toad walking around definitely would have exposed things. So on one hand it seems very unfair, but I do understand it. I just wish there was a different way to help Toad. I thought maybe Big B would be able to pay for glamours or somehow, but it doesn't seem like that was able to happen. Continuing the discussion with Aunty Greenleaf, we are actually going to move into the theories. So these are some of the topics that I'm most interested to talk about, just because when I learned them I got so excited and I really wanted to share them. Like I said, the first one has to do with Aunty Greenleaf, and not just her but her daughter Rachel. So in the video game, when we appear to the apartment, a little girl called Rachel opens the door and says that her mother, Aunty Greenleaf, is out, she's not there. We do some investigating and turns out it is actually Aunty Greenleaf glamoured as Rachel. So I didn't really know too much of the backstory, but apparently in the comic books, in the other world, Aunty Greenleaf actually lost her daughter Rachel, and as far as I understand, she didn't pass away, but she just got lost and she ended up being stuck in that world. So when the fables ended up coming to the normal world, Rachel actually got left behind in the other world, in the magical world. And so there's actually a very interesting theory, because they talk a lot about how aging happens, and this was mostly theories that I learned online. Like someone pointed out that, you know, the Little Mermaid in the fairy tale, she was like a teenager, she was quite young, and now she's old enough to work at a club. So aging definitely works different in this world, and so some people actually speculate that maybe Rachel grew up, had some resentment, had some issues from being lost, from being abandoned. She wasn't able to grow up with her mom, and when you compare side to side images, Rachel looks a lot like Bloody Mary, and that gave me shivers when I saw it. The theory is that Rachel got lost and she ended up changing her name, becoming Bloody Mary, working with the Crooked Man, and just being an absolute savage, and then somehow managed to escape that world and go to the normie world. It would be very interesting why she wouldn't meet up with her mom, but I don't really know what happens in the comic books. Like maybe there was some sort of resentment, thinking that her mom did it on purpose. Meanwhile, her mother's just living with the sadness of losing her daughter. It's very interesting, and it also kind of makes sense why Aunty Greenleaf is so attached to that magical tree. I mean, it's the only thing she had left. It's so interesting to think about. I was blown away when I read that theory, and so that's definitely something that I just wanted to share with you guys. So the next one we are going to be covering isn't really a theory, but more just some interesting facts. It has to do a little bit with Snow White, which is why I decided to add it to this list, because I haven't really spoken about her too much, and this was a lot of lore and backstory that I didn't really get through the gameplay. I only really figured it out after doing research after the fact, and even with that I haven't gotten all the information down. So if you guys want to look up more about the stuff, go ahead. I find it very interesting, and I'm sure you guys will too if you're interested in this stuff. So to start the story, I'm going to be talking about Flycatcher. Now, I've mentioned that I really love the character Flycatcher. He just seems so sweet, and I don't know, there was something about his character that really drew me to him, but I didn't really know the fairy tale behind him. So I did a little bit of research, and he comes from a fairy tale called The Frog Prince. And in The Frog Prince, they are twin sisters that across a frog. One of them ends up kissing the frog turns into a prince, which would be Flycatcher. One of the sisters marry him, the other one married a different prince, and that's basically how the story goes. But the interesting thing is that the twin sisters were actually Snow White and a girl called Rose Red, and I have never heard of Rose Red before. It was really interesting to first read about her, and then when I was editing my videos back, I actually realized that Snow White mentions her sister in the game, and I didn't even realize it at the time because I never heard the name Rose Red. Her backstory was very interesting. There's a lot to it, but it also mentions Bluebeard, which is a character that, again, I don't really like the way he handles things. He's not really my favorite character, but apparently at some stage Rose was actually engaged to Bluebeard, and she decided to get out of the marriage by basically faking her death, which is a bit extreme, but it kind of worked for a while. Apparently Big B found out that she faked her death, and she was punished by being sent to do community service at the farm. I don't know if any of this is actually true. It would be really cool if this was true, but this is just something I read about and I wanted to share. So all of this is very interesting. There's a lot more to their story, but these are just like a few things that I wanted to share with you guys. Like I said, it's not really a theory, but more just extra knowledge that I didn't know and I was really fascinated to learn about. The last theory that I want to talk about is probably the most interesting and plays a huge role in the video game, especially at the end. So when I first played it through, I was quite confused. It took me a while to kind of try and figure out what was going on, and after looking up a few things on the internet, I think that I kind of have a solution to kind of unfuzzle my brain from everything that was happening. So right in the beginning of the video game, Bigby talks to Faith. He doesn't know Faith yet, he doesn't know who she is, doesn't know she's going to be a huge part of the story, but he's talking to her and she says a few key words that is very interesting. At the end of the video game, we have Bigby talking to Nerissa, and basically it seems like she is leaving to go somewhere else and they're kind of having their last conversation. Nerissa uses almost the same phrasing that Faith used, and although it could have been a coincidence, it didn't feel like a coincidence. I noticed it, but I don't think I necessarily said anything because I thought maybe something more would be revealed, but it kind of ended on a cliffhanger with Nerissa running away, and then you had an option to chase her down as Bigby because it seemed like he kind of realized something that they didn't necessarily tell the audience. So there is a theory that based on Nerissa's confession of how she was the one who left Faith at his doorstep so that he would investigate her death, there's actually a theory that we never met Faith. Bigby never met Faith, and in actual fact Nerissa was just glamored to be Faith, to kind of get that introduction out the way so that when her body was left at Bigby's door, he would be more invested in trying to figure out what happened to her. So this theory was so interesting because Nerissa had access to glamours. I mean, all the girls had access to illegal glamours. That was a big part of the story as well. So she had the means to, and it is very possible that she glamoured as Faith and she purposefully caused a ruckus at the Woodsman, knowing that Bigby would have to show up, meet her basically. You know, she was very mysterious about the whole thing. They both smoke cigarettes, but to be fair, a lot of characters do, so that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But the whole thing was, you know, Nerissa was going to make this whole big deal to kind of introduce herself to Bigby, and that's why they both use the exact same phrasing, because Nerissa was glamoured to be Faith, and so Faith was already dead at this point, and Nerissa just didn't really know how to go about it, and so that was kind of her plan. Because of the ribbons, they can't say anything, so Nerissa really couldn't just walk up to Bigby and say, listen, there was a murder, the crooked man's behind it, Georgie Porgy, Vivian created the ribbons. She couldn't say any of this because of the curse that was placed upon her, and so it is such an interesting theory, thinking that we never met Faith. That is just such a mind-blowing thing for me to think about and makes so much more sense. I honestly do think that's what Bigby figured out at the end because of the same phrasing that she used. Also, I think right in the beginning, if I'm correct, Faith pointed out like, oh, do you like my ribbon, while you're talking to her, and at some point when you're talking to Nerissa, she also refers to her ribbon in very similar, if not the same words, and so there's another connection there. Yeah, the whole theory is just very interesting, and I was so excited to share this theory with you guys because I told so many people about this theory who never even played the video games, and they looked at me as if I was crazy because they don't know the context behind it. But you guys who are here, who are fans of the video game, obviously would kind of follow along with me. Let me know if you guys believe in any of these theories. I think a lot of them are very plausible. There's probably more theories out there, but I didn't do too much research, plus this video is going on for an abnormally long time, so apologies about that. But I did want to make just a final video for the series just to kind of wrap up my thoughts about this game. Final thoughts: I love this game. I'm definitely going to play it again in my free time, choose different choices and just kind of see where I end up. it was a lot of fun, and I'm really glad that I did decide to play this game. In the future, I'm planning on playing a lot more Telltale games as well, because I just love the way that decisions actually impacted the game. Even if it doesn't have a huge impact, it does have somewhat of an impact, and so I'm really excited to play more Telltale games. I think this was a really good game for me to start with. But yeah, I am going to end this very long video here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so that you're notified every time I post a new video. Very soon I am going to be posting a new gameplay series, so stay hyped for that. I'm very excited for you guys to watch that playthrough. I'm having fun with it. I've already started it, so I'm excited to edit and release those very soon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys!